With the recent report from B'Tselem, boldly titled Our Genocide, a Jerusalem-based human rights group joins the large body of opinion that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. This body also includes leading human rights groups and even Israeli Holocaust and genocide scholars. Israel has blocked an astonishing amount of food precisely when Gazans desperately needed it to survive. They are now dying of starvation, reports, among others, Haaretz's editorial board. Even if you allow third-party aid in, but so little that the population starves, that can still be interpreted, and has been, as a genocidal act. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda has also concluded as much. The trial judgment for one Jean-Paul Akayezu, who was convicted of genocide, reads, "Contrary to popular belief, the crime of genocide does not imply the actual extermination of a group in its entirety, but acts mentioned in the Genocide Convention committed with the specific intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group." The chamber is of the opinion that the means of deliberate inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, include, inter alia, subjecting a group of people to a subsistence diet, systematic expulsion from homes, and the reduction of essential medical services below minimum requirement.
These were specific pieces of medical equipment that seemed to have been systematically disabled. And I had a hard time trying to think of a way that this would be addressing a military threat. Because this is equipment that's just used to take care of patients and nothing more. You can't weaponize a dialysis machine.
Certainly, one can reasonably conclude that Gazans are being subjected to a subsistence diet, and not only through restricting aid trucks, but by targeting the means to produce food. This blueprint was articulated by, notably, General Giora Island, who called not only for stopping the flow of electricity, diesel, and water to Gaza, but gradually attacking targets that provide these essential needs. This was promptly carried out, write B'Tselem. In addition to blocking incoming aid, Israel has systematically destroyed much of the infrastructure that enables local food production in Gaza. For example, in November 2023, Israel bombed the only operating wheat mill in the entire strip. Two U.S. government agencies responsible for coordinating humanitarian aid concluded that Israel had deliberately delayed and obstructed the entry of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and that it bore primary responsibility for the hunger there. Those two agencies are USAID and the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. USAID was particularly troubled with a stockpile of flour, enough to feed 1.5 million people for 5 months, that was being blocked personally by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. Indeed, responsibility for the genocide is not limited to military leaders, but also civilian ones. The decision-making was not limited to the War Cabinet. Smotrich had earlier shared an article by General Giora Island, who called for inducing epidemics of disease in Gaza, and the finance minister said he agreed with every word of it on Twitter. Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March 2025, the starvation of Gaza's population has become official and openly declared policy. As observed by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who wrote in Haaretz of starving out Gaza. On this issue, the position of senior government figures is public and clear. Yes, we've been denying Gazans food, medicine, and basic living needs as part of an explicit policy. Netanyahu, typically, is trying to blur the type of orders he's been giving in order to evade legal and criminal responsibility in due course. But some of his lackeys are saying so outright, in public, even with pride. Yes, we will starve out Gaza. Because all Gazans are Hamas, there's no moral or operational limitation on exterminating them all, over 2 million people. As B'Tselem report, Targeted military aggression has continued against Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, the second largest hospital in Gaza. In June 2025, the military ordered everyone inside to evacuate. Attacks on other hospitals are part of a new military offensive, Haaretz reports. Of course, not only hospitals, but Gaza has itself been largely destroyed. 92% of homes in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed as of February 2025, according to the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Further, according to OCHA, by May 2025, 69% of all structures had been damaged or destroyed. Entire cities have been destroyed outright. In June 2025, Haaretz reported, Rafah is gone, razed to the ground, and it's not the only city wiped out by the Israeli army. Indeed, on the eve of the war, the Rafah metropolitan area in Gaza had a population of 275,000. Jabalia had 65,000 residents. Beit Lahia had 108,000. Today, these cities are little more than ruins. The scale of destruction wrought by Israel stands out even among the most extreme wartime cases in modern history. The BBC has reported on the destruction of civilian buildings in July 2025, saying, entire towns and suburbs, once home to tens of thousands of people, were leveled in the past few weeks.
This is part of central Rafah on the 29th of March. You can already see that there are areas that have been destroyed here. And this is from the 4th of July. And you can see that almost every building has been razed to the ground in a period of just over 3 months.
This destruction has been celebrated by the Prime Minister. The Jerusalem Post quoted him as saying, "We are destroying more and more homes. They have nowhere to return to. The only inevitable outcome will be the desire of Gazans to emigrate outside of the Gaza Strip." Surveys found a majority of the Israeli public agreed with the statement, "There are no innocents in Gaza." Apparently 64%. A consequence of military conscription and the idolization of the military in Israeli society. B'Tselem writes, the elevated status of the Israeli military and the framing of the Palestinian collective as a security threat, together with years of dehumanization, have over time formed a clear hierarchy in which the lives of Israeli soldiers are above the lives of Palestinian civilians. This prioritization is evident in the military's long-standing policies regarding various combat scenarios, such as the use of civilians as human shields, permissive open-fire regulations that exceed the limits of international law, and widespread, imprecise bombing of civilian areas to protect soldiers on the ground. If the standards applied to Jean-Paul Akayesu, convicted of the crime of genocide by an international tribunal, were applied to Israeli leaders, it's more than obvious that Israeli leaders are guilty of committing genocide. Netanyahu and others are certainly, evidently, guilty of systematic expulsion from homes.
Israel's Defense Minister Katz revealed today in a briefing to journalists that Israel is preparing to establish a new humanitarian city in the area of the former city of Rafah. In the first stage at least, the aim is to start reducing the number of people who are in the Mawasi.
Indeed, the Prime Minister himself extolled how the military was destroying homes, leaving no choice but for them to leave. As for forcing the population onto a subsistence diet, Gazans are dying of starvation. A third of the population doesn't eat for multiple days in a row, and the population is living off of cereals and tubers, with meat and dairy virtually non-existent. As for the reduction of essential medical services below minimum requirement, aside from bombing hospitals, write B'Tselem, as of June 2025, only 17 out of 36 hospitals in the Strip are still partially functioning, while facing critical shortages of staff, fuel, and medical equipment. I was deeply haunted by an article I read last year by a trauma surgeon named David Knott, who wrote for The Economist. Knott had worked in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He called Gaza like no war zone I have ever witnessed. Working at the only functioning hospital in Rafah, there were some 40 beds for 2,000 patients. Many had wounds that had been stitched but fallen apart, dressed with sodden gauzes stinking of pus and bacteria. All were malnourished, further weakening their immunity and the normal healing process. As for medicine, all pharmacies had closed down and there were no drugs. As a result, there was no access to daily medications for people with chronic illnesses, such as diabetes, and those with cardiological, renal, oncological, and hematological diseases. Some children could not breathe owing to the effects of simple chest infections that had progressed and turned their lungs into pools of pus. For the first time in my life, I found myself clinically diagnosing this awful condition, something you would read about in a medical book in the 19th century, in young children. Next to one 6-year-old, I found half a liter of pus in the drain bottle.